presumably we are now ready to welcome the Commissioner, who is going to give you the welcome address, because that's why we're all here. So it's Günther Oettinger, the European Commissioner for Budget and Human Resources. Thank you very much. And introducing him, we have the Director-General for the Directorate-General of Translation at the European Commission, who I'm sure needs no introduction to all of you in the room here. It's Rytis MARTIKONIS. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The steps are at that side.
Very good morning, Jennifer, and thank you for doing my job. Because I was meant to start sharp at 9 and to welcome you all here, to welcome you all in saying welcome to Brussels, welcome to the 4th edition of Translating Europe Forum on this nice, fresh morning in Brussels. And we're here to have a great day and a half, looking into the room, looking into the potential that we have gathered here today. I'm sure we are bound for success. Look, this is a special gathering. This is a special gathering which complements other gatherings in a translation world. Be it FIT meeting in Brisbane in August, be it TechCom next week in Stuttgart, when the language industry will be gathering there, or sort of the annual meeting of Gala in spring. I think this is a community of interest in which each and every of us have a part to play, have an interest and contribution to make. The preparation for this and the forum itself does not start only now. This year we tried a number of things to make into the run-up of this meeting. I thank a number of colleagues here who were contributing to the Facebook Live events, to the annotations. And I'm sure that we will be hearing also today from Miguel, from Jaap, from Marion, those who were anticipating this event. We're also doing smaller things, Translating Europe workshops locally, to continue some of the discussions which we start in this more central gathering in Brussels. And when I look around, either in Translating Europe workshop in Hungary or in Flori in Italy, Gdansk in Poland, again Berlin next week, I feel that we are here doing something important for the profession, something important for the communities that we serve. One last point before I will welcome on stage our Commissioner, Commissioner Oettinger, is that I'm very glad to welcome a good number of young people, be it of DGT trainees, EMT, European Master of Translation programs, stagiaires in this room. This is something that we feel in the Commission, in DGT, we feel strongly about that, and we think that this is not only the future of the profession, this is the present of the profession, and we are mutually to benefit from each other's presence. Without any further ado, I think we are really privileged that Commissioner Oettinger, responsible for money of the Commission, for people of the Commission, for translation and interpretation services of the Commission, is with us this morning. And Commissioner, in your busy schedules, in your sort of political battles that you are battling, to have you with us is a privilege, is honor. I invite you to take the stage and set this gathering of language professionals open. Please welcome Commissioner Oettinger.
Verehrter Herr Director-General, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge honor and pleasure to be able to welcome you here in Brussels on behalf of the European Commission. I wish you 2 very successful days of work in this multicultural and very enriching forum. You have here representatives of scientific and research institutions, universities, as well as professional, active translators and linguists, representatives of member states, from the services of the European Commission, and also from many bodies and institutions outside the European Union. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. It is my particular pleasure to be able to welcome here the younger generation, the future of communication and language, and to see so many of you here. And I'm sure that you will be able to make a concrete contribution to the success of the coming 2 days. Europe, or the European Union, as a very important part of the continent of Europe, remains a very risky undertaking. It was started not long after the Second World War, when Europe was riddled with debt and division and was set up to promote peace. We now have our own values. We have the internal market, which has got rid of all internal obstacles to trade, and which is a huge marketplace for 500 million customers associated with other countries such as the Western Balkans and Switzerland. We also have Europe, Europe of the currency union, and Europe is also the continent of freedom of movement. We no longer have walls or physical barriers. This therefore means that Europeans can travel throughout Europe to work, to go on holiday, to spend their holidays, to do whatever they want. We have 24 working languages, and should we be able to attain the freedom of the entire island of Cyprus, then Turkish will become the 25th language of the European Union, because on Cyprus, of course, on the island of Cyprus, we have a community of Turkish-speaking Cypriots. Now, Europe is emerging from a period of crisis. We have now arrived at stability. Despite Brexit, we see growth, and we also see a recovery on the labour market, even in those regions which had been of particular concern to us in the recent past, such as Spain, Greece and Portugal, and the south of Italy. Now, you might well wonder why I am mentioning these issues. Quite simply because this multicultural continent cannot survive without communication, language and translation. And we will not be able to continue to do our work without communication, language and translation. If we were to see Europe born today in a world of globalization and social media, if we had the global opportunities of technological dialogue, then perhaps there would only be one language. However, languages developed in nooks and crannies and valleys which were home to people and where they grew up. And that is how multilingual Europe has developed. The fact that we have 24 languages here in Europe has played a decisive role in the history of Europe. And this was also due, in no small part, to the limited mobility of our forefathers. Languages are related to power and politics. The fact that Latin became a very powerful language and remains the basis of many languages today was because of the powerful nature of the Roman Empire, extending all the way from the Mediterranean to Central and Northern Europe. Chinese is also a very powerful language, and that also links back to the history of the country. We have now Greater China, which is not just one linguistic area, but however, when we see China from the outside, we see it as the land where Chinese are spoken. The fact that English has now become the most important language in the world, is linked to the British Empire and the conquest of many parts of the world by the British Empire. And that remains true to the current day. If the world were to be created today, and if we were then to look at the current circumstances, we would not have hundreds of languages on the 24 which we have in Europe, plus the dialects. We would have perhaps just one language. Now, I come from Baden-Württemberg, from Stuttgart to be exact, and Hochdeutsch is not my native tongue. I can write it fine, but to speak Hochdeutsch is a bit of a struggle. We have a whole series of different dialects in my region. These days, I think it is true to say that, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, dialects are becoming increasingly insignificant. And the question is this: if dialects lose their importance in the valleys where they were born, does this also mean that languages are losing their importance and their significance? Now, I have no idea what the future centuries will look like. If you look at the media and social media in particular, then it would seem to be English, the English language, which dominates social media and all communication on the internet. But I have no idea what the future will hold for those generations who are currently growing up. Will their own language still mean their own cultural history, their own home, their own consciousness and identity, or not? Europe was in a period of crisis, as I have said, and in Porto, in Munich, in Bolzen, and in Athens, you heard many denigrating Brussels, Eurocrats, but I remain strong in my belief in the European Union as a bridge between the USA and Asia. If Europe wishes to reflect its values in the world of tomorrow, and if we wish to represent a firm and solid future for our children and our grandchildren here in Europe, then we need Europe and we need the European team. Each member state will be far too small to face the world of tomorrow on its own. However, if you look at things the other way around, if you need the European Union, if you want an internal market, and if you bear in mind the fact that a great many rules and standards are set at European level, you have to realize that if you wish to express diversity, you have to care for diversity. The European Union is a union built on diversity. That is our strength, and it is also at the same time our weakness. If we did not have this undertaking in the treaty, according to which each and every citizen of the European Union is able to communicate in his or her mother tongue, and every member of the European Parliament is able to use their native tongue, every citizen of Europe can expect an answer to queries from the European Commission in their native language. When European law is transposed into national law, it has to be transposed into the national language of that member state. Each and every regulation, every rule in Europe, which mostly are drawn up here in Brussels in English and French, still have to be translated into each and every language in the Union before they can legally enter into force. Then I think that if this were not the case, if we did not have that rule in the treaty, there would be less acceptance of Europe than there is today. Communication in citizens' native language and translation into these native languages is an important contribution to ensuring that the 500 million citizens of Europe continue to accept Europe and the European Union, because this gives rise to trust, confidence and legal security. You and those like you can make a contribution to ensuring that there is acceptance for Europe. Now, you are busy in the background by translating texts, by translating draft letters into the language of the person sending in an inquiry to the Commission. You, with your colleagues, interpreters, are a decisive factor in ensuring that the European Union is accepted by the 500 million citizens of Europe and can ensure that there is trust in the work which we do, as well as ensuring that we have a full legal certainty and security, because citizens will only accept laws if they can actually understand what those laws mean in their own mother tongue. Which is why I would like to thank you for the work which you do. I hope that today we will be able to jointly address the question of what your profession will look like, not just in the next year, but in the next decade, and in the next decade but one. If a young student is wondering whether they should embark on this career to transpose content perfectly and precisely from one language to another. If this young student is perhaps just 22, 23 and is thinking forward to retiring in the future at 67 or 70, they wonder what the next 50 or 55 years will look like. What will this profession look like, not just next year, but in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 years? Now, no one has any precise idea. However, if you can have an ongoing dialogue between experts to look forward to see what translation will look like in 2030 and 2040, taking account of globalization, digitization, what does the digital revolution, for example, mean to you in your profession? Will jobs still exist? Will there be jobs lost because of globalization and digitization? Does digitization mean total transformation or a disruption of the way in which you work? Is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity? Will it make your job easier or harder? Will it be easier to work more quickly as a translator thanks to digital technologies, or will the opposite be true? This is one of the reasons why I very much welcome the thrust of this conference, and I hope very much, Director-General, that when we meet again in the next few days, you can report back to me on the most important findings and conclusions of this conference. The European Commission has to remain an attractive employer in this increasingly competitive world. We have to ensure that young, ambitious and gifted people are attracted to come and work for the European Commission, for DGT in Luxembourg and here in Brussels, and indeed throughout Europe, which is why we are looking at what has been done elsewhere, for example, in industry, because translation is also necessary for global industrial players. If you, for example, buy a new car, whether it's a Mercedes, a Peugeot, or a Honda, you have a driver's manual, and today these driver's manuals are drawn up in hundreds of different languages on a daily basis, because every person who goes out and buys a new car should be able to have this car explained to them in detail in the language which they best understand. That is customer service. That is why I maintain that globalization represents a real opportunity to you. If, despite globalization and despite social media, we can still ensure that we can maintain the culture of our native tongue and still be globally successful, then we are going to need you. So thank you all very much indeed for being here. Your cooperation is of the utmost importance to us, and I am sure that over the coming 2 days we will receive a great deal of very useful advice and input from you as regards the future developments in our DG to ensure that we will be able to boost perfect, precise and skilled linguistic mediation and translation here in Europe, to promote communication both with our citizens here in Europe and with the outside world, so that we can have a transparent, open and trusting society. Thank you.